Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of AoS Close-Ups. This week we take a look at the new Wizard Warrior Spaz who literally vomits out raw power, the Orruk Weirdnob Shaman. We'll take a look at his background, his rules, and what he can do on the tabletop. Most all races have wizards, and most of these races' wizards become wielders of magic because they went through an ancient ritual, or studied magical tomes for years, even decades, or gained the power through some arcane or demonic device. But none of these paths are what leads to the creation of a Weirdnob Shaman. Simply, it only takes a good old hard knock on the head. And from that point forward, these shamans stumble and drivel about the battlefield, almost completely oblivious to the goings-on around them. They harness the violent and wildly unpredictable green energy known as Wog magic into power that can flatten castle walls. Literally, a foot will fall from the sky and stop castle walls until they're flat. Ironjawz mostly leave the Weirdnobs alone, as so many of the less cautious brutes have had their heads suddenly exploded. A lesson learned for everyone else. Ironjawz love to bring Weirdnobs along to the brawls because the shaman's power gets more and more devastating the bigger the fight. At its weakest, the shaman can conjure a hail of fists to batter enemy champions. At its highest, the shaman can vomit pure energy that will sweep away entire armies, dissolving them like rocks caught by a lava flow. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the rules. It looks like most Orruk infantry will be on the slow side of the movement phase with only a 4-inch move. So far, that type of move I've only seen reserved for most of the totem bearers of other races, so it does look like one of the weaknesses of the Orruks will be their movement. They will be slower than most things. They do have their strengths, however, and the shaman in this respect is tougher than his counterparts with 6 wounds rather than 5. He comes with a decent basic armor save of 5 up, and then he has a middling bravery stat of 6. Now, this shouldn't be a problem. He's not going to be taking battle shock phases because he's a lone model. He is a hero. However, though, if he does come against those few weapons out there that target your bravery, he's probably going to be a little bit susceptible to them. He is only armed with a Wog staff that can give him 1 to 3 attacks, which all hit 50-50, and then they wound better at a consistent 3 up. He surprisingly, for a wizard, has a rend characteristic of -1, but then he does have the staple D3 wounds most staffs have. Now, the Weirdnob has one ability called Power of the Wog, which increases his effectiveness as a caster and an embinder contingent on the number of Orruks around him. If there are 10 or more within 10 inches, this means he gets a tactical +1 boost to both of those attempts. However, if there are at least 20 within the same distance, he will have a commanding +2 boost to these rolls. Of course, Orruks being Orruks, you always need a rule that will demonstrate their power to hurt themselves more than the enemy, and so if any of these rolls result with a double, then the closest Orruk unit will suffer D3 mortal wounds. Now unfortunately, this seems to me to mean that this will always be the shaman himself, since he is an Orruk unit and no one can be closer to you than yourself. And all it says is that the closest Orruk unit gets hit, not the next closest or whatnot. So I don't know if this is what GW's intent was, but then again, you never know with GW. Now finally, we take a look at his magic. The shaman only casts and unbinds once in their respective phases, but the shaman has a bigger than normal selection of spells to choose from, with 4. 2 that are unique to the shaman are Green Puke and Foot of Gork. Both spells are hard to cast without the help of the Power of the Wog, but both hit multiple units for their trouble. Green Puke does D3 mortal wounds if you roll an 8 or more to any unit in a straight line within 2d6 inches. This is helpful if you're in a giant scrum with a bunch of different units. Now, Foot of Gork hits any unit within 18 inches of the shaman, doing D6 mortal wounds. Now that's pretty good, but it's kind of a steep casting for a 10 up. But don't worry, on a 4 or better, you can do it again, and again, and again, and again, until you just stop rolling 4 ups. So now it makes a little bit more sense why it's so high. Now that covers all the rules. Let's talk about the rolls. Now the role of the Weirdnob Shaman is twofold, but it's fairly straightforward. First, it's magic defense, and then living artillery. This guy needs to be in the center of your army, probably even better if you just stick him in the middle of a unit, just to ensure you're getting those bonuses to casting and unbinding rolls, thanks to the Power of the Wog ability. Now, You want to keep him in the middle. He's going to be able to keep pace with the army so that when you're moving your army as a whole to advance, he's going to be not as vulnerable, but still being able to provide you with that valuable magic defense. Now, if you're relying on the Shaman as your only defense against magic, which is definitely going to be the case if you're running a pure Ironjawz force, then I would strongly encourage running more than one of the Shamans, as they can be assassinated fairly easily with enough attention, especially since they are apt to hurt themselves, if I'm right about them counting themselves as being the closest unit when inflicting the D3 mortal wounds for rolling doubles. If I'm wrong, then it's not a big deal, but it's good just to keep that in mind. If you're wanting to use him mostly though for the foot, bolt, or the puke, then I would suggest running the War Scroll battalion called the Ironjawz Weirdfist. For every unit in the battalion that's within 10 inches, you roll a die, and if the roll is a 1 through 3, you still get a bonus. It increases the range of your spell by 6 inches, which is pretty handy if you're rolling the 2d6 spell. If it's 4 through 6, you add 1 mortal wound to the roll of any wounds inflicted by spells that do mortal wounds. It then says something a little curious, which is going to probably cause debate. It says, if the spell inflicts mortal wounds more than once, then add the bonus each time. Now, I imagine this means that if you roll a Foot of Gork, your initial attack will be d6 plus 1. Now, if you trigger again on a 4-up, I think it's trying to say that you retain the bonus for another d6 plus 1. But I bet there will be an argument, and it might become a popular argument, that this probably means that you add the bonus again, so that when you roll a 4-up, the guy will get d6 plus 1 plus 1. And then if you do it for a third time against a third unit, then d6 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. Now, again, I doubt this is what it's meant by it, but you know how people will read words, and in the end of the day, GW could rule it in that direction because we just don't know. So this is definitely something you need to clear up before you start playing the game. And that will conclude this episode of AoS Close-Ups. Please like and subscribe, feel free to comment below about what unit you'd like to see next, and thank you for watching.